Hello, friends. We're finishing up the book of Ezekiel today as we're reading through the Bible this year. We have, after this, next week, we'll be looking at the book of Daniel. And then we're on to the minor prophets, of which there's 12, and we'll move much more quickly through them. I'm not sure exactly what I'll do there as far as frequency of this. I have we'll see what the schedule looks like. So anyway, Ezekiel is another long book and varied. It kind of takes us on a journey that kind of goes by relatively slowly here. It's been over the course of quite some time if you're following the schedule that I am on here, reading through here. Today I want to talk about Ezekiel chapters 40 through 47, I think, and a particular extended vision that Ezekiel has of the restoration of the temple. Remember, we looked in last video, if you saw that, about God's kind of indwelling presence leaving the temple, and all of the things that God promised if the people's rebellion against him reached a certain point, that he would no longer dwell among them in that unique way. And so in the previous vision, Ezekiel saw God's presence, God's glory moving up from, being resting on the ark, etc., and moving away from the temple and away there. And so as we've seen in Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, both judgment and hope promise for better days to come. And this section is about hope. Of course, at this point, the temple has been destroyed. The Ark of the Covenant, which was in that Holy of Holies, the most holy place, was taken away, never to be heard from again. And we have no idea. There's been a lot of movies and books speculating about what may have happened to the Ark of the Covenant. But when there is a temple rebuilt, it's not there. It's not there in the time of Jesus. And that's the situation there with that. So I'm not going to move through this in any kind of systematic way. I just want to hit a couple points and kind of throw a couple of things out there for us to think about as we move forward in our reading here as well. So chapter 40, verse 1, he says, in the 25th year of our exile. Okay, so that's pause. That's important. 25 years into being kicked out, removed, exiled from Jerusalem, from Israel, from their home where they wanted to be. 25 years later, God is going to give Ezekiel this vision that brings them a good bit of hope. Remember, the temple was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians. So 25th year of our exile, at the beginning of the year, on the very day the hand of the Lord was on me, and he took me there. Where? We'll see. To Jerusalem. In visions. Okay, so this is not literal. God is not literally bringing him there. This is all, again, very much in the type of literature like Revelation. We'll see some of this in Daniel as well. God's showing him this vision to give him hope, but it's not physically there. Right? I hope that should be, I guess, obvious and makes sense, right? God took me there to the land of Israel and set me on a high mountain. And he's going to show him things. And he wants, at the end of that verse 4, tell the people of Israel everything you see. So I think the point is that he wants to give them hope that there's something else going on. So in this, there's a rather elaborate multi-chapter description of this of a new sort of version of the temple, a new rebuilding, and a lot of detail about that will look like, the different rooms and the gates and the places for preparing sacrifices and the rooms for the priests and all these kind of things at some in some detail, which is sort of interesting. So verse 43, chapter 43. Let's look there for a second. He says, then the man his sort of guide, if you will, brought me to the gate facing east, and I saw the glory of the God of Israel coming from the east. Now, remember, back to the last video, and if you didn't watch that, you may want to give the sort of context for this. Again, I mentioned he saw God's glory, presence leaving, rising, leaving, off to the east. It went away, now is coming back. This is sort of a pattern, right? We'll see this pattern we'll pick up with, of course, Jesus as well. Okay, so I saw the glory of the God of Israel coming from the east. His voice was like the roar of rushing waters, and the land was radiant in his glory. The vision I saw was like the vision I had seen when he came to destroy the city. Okay, there's our connection. And like the visions I have seen, verse 4, the glory of the Lord entered the temple. So right now this is a vision of hope for a reversal of what happened earlier, 25 years into that exile. The glory of the Lord entered the temple through the gate facing east. Then the Spirit lifted me up and brought me into the inner court, and the glory of the Lord filled the temple. So this is the vision he's seeing. This is not a moment in time on the ground in history like at the end of the book of Exodus, God's glory filling the tabernacle. This is not history on the ground like when Solomon completed the building of the stone permanent, I guess is maybe not the right way to put it, but not movable temple. God's glory presence filled it. That was an on the ground reality. This is a vision. He's seeing a vision of God's glory refilling this new temple. One of the questions is going to be, or the challenge is to really discern this big picture biblical piece, is that we never have a historical narrative of God's glory filling the temple that gets rebuilt, like in Ezra and Nehemiah, or when Herod kind of really expands on it a lot. There's no narrative of God's presence refilling the temple. So one of the questions is like, did that happen in any meaningful way? Or at this point, from when the temple was destroyed, is the reality really going to be moved forward to Jesus and his people as temple, which we'll see a lot of in the New Testament and sort of reflect on. So there's some challenges here in how we think about this in the big picture. But in any case, what we're looking at here is that God is showing Ezekiel this vision, I believe, again, to give him hope that he's not done. This story is not over. There's hope to be had in the midst of exile, in the midst of the pain of wilderness. Verse 7, he said, "Son of man," that's what he calls Ezekiel. This is the place of my throne, and the place for the soles of my feet. This is where I will live among the Israelites forever. Right. So we see here this promise of God dwelling, God living among his people forever. This is the big picture of the biblical storyline. This is Genesis, the beginning. This is for us at Revelation at the end, and all the way through. This is the big picture biblical storyline. God living amongst his people. That's what they're after. That's what we should be after here. And the story. So in verse 9 and what follows, and etc., that it, of course, this has to come along with an ethical change. That it cannot. This is not just going to be a recycle of the same story where God comes again and then they are equally equally bad, I guess, if you will. So he says in verse 9, "Now let them put away from me their prostitution." That's language used. We'll see it again here for the way that God's people have been in their relationship, if you with him. It's been like prostitution. They've been unfaithful. They've been adulterous in their devotion to God at this, in this part of the story. So yeah, and then there's more detail. Altar, the priesthood restored, and again, always there's a lot here, and I want to talk for just a minute about chapter 47. So, question's going to be, again, in the big picture of the whole story. And again, we're just at this moment in time, but I just kind of want to seed some things for you to think about as we continue reading forward in the story. So Ezekiel has this vision here of a new version, a new iteration, a rebuilding of the temple. So questions are going to be, okay, when the temple is actually rebuilt in history, again, Ezra, Nehemiah, and then is expanded at that point, what we call the Second Temple period. The first temple is the one that Solomon built. The second temple is in this, what's going to happen. But what Ezekiel describes, or what Ezekiel sees in this vision, is more than what that one is. And so an interpretive question remains: what happens with, where does what Ezekiel imagines fit into the big picture of what's going forward? So in some methods of interpretation, this has to be fulfilled literally, so that now some folks will say, so the end is part of the sort of the end times deal, that a temple that looks like this is going to have to get rebuilt. And a lot of the language in here is very earthy, and in that way, it doesn't seem like spiritual in a lot of ways. And so you can see that there's a lot of challenges to that, though, for us as believers in the New Testament, and where it goes there, where the story picks up on the pages of the New Testament, seems to take this vision and move it in a direction that ends in Revelation 21 and 22, rather than in putting bricks back together for another temple. But that's something we have to maybe think about a little bit in the future. But I just kind of wanted to put that out there so we can begin to be thinking about that when we flip pages. Some of the clues that there's maybe more here going on than just kind of a literal physical rebuilding of this temple come in chapter 47, where we see some really wonderful and miraculous things that don't seem to be very easily connected with the literal sense of temple. So let's take a look at that in the few moments that we're going to have left here. The man, his sort of guide here, brought me back to the entrance of the temple, and I saw water coming out from under the threshold of the temple towards the east, for the water faced east. And there's water coming out, and as he walks through this water, again, this is a vision that he sees here, the water gets deeper and deeper and deeper as he goes, and it eventually becomes, in verse 5, now a river that I could not cross, because the water had risen and was deep enough to swim in, a river that no one could cross. And he asked me, Son of man, do you see this? So there's this river coming out from under this vision of a temple he sees, and it grows, and it gets deeper and deeper and deeper as it moves. Where does it end up? We'll see here in a second. Excuse me. Then he led me back to the bank of the river. When I arrived there, I saw a great number of trees on the side of the river. He said to me, this water flows towards the eastern region, where it goes down into the Arabah, where it enters the Dead Sea. Okay, so there's the, you want to pick up a map at some point here, and it's going to be fascinating to think about if you've ever been or are going to go to the land and kind of think about where these places are, etc. I just decided today, the next time I'm at the Dead Sea with a group of people, I'm going to talk about this vision because it's so cool. Anyway, he said, so this water is coming from this vision of a temple in Jerusalem, and it's going down to the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea is called the Dead Sea because nothing lives in it. It's salt. The salt level was so incredibly high that no fish, no life, whatever can live in it. And so that's important background to kind of capture the power of this image that he sees here. So let me read it. When this river empties into the sea, the salty water there becomes fresh. Okay. Swarms of living creatures will live wherever the river flows. There will be large numbers of fish because this water flows there and makes the salt water fresh. So where the river flows, everything will live. Wow. Okay. So now we're getting into some really interesting stuff. Again, to ask the sort of question, what's the point of this? You can reflect on it and think about it yourself, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. But my thought is this, that in this context, as God is bringing both Ezekiel and his people in exile hope, he's giving them a vision that this is not the end of their story. Again, we've seen this throughout these prophets already again and again and again. There's going to be a restoration of the presence of God in their midst. And we see this like Ezekiel's vision of the dry bones coming back to life, of God providing for them what they cannot do themselves, of God providing this life-giving, miraculous, world-changing power that's going to make something into something else. It's going to make that which is dead now alive again. And that is what God is giving hope to his people for, beyond however we interpret some of these aspects and imageries of this vision going forward. God is this God of restoration, indeed even resurrection. And so that's, as we reflect upon again, the same lesson really that we've looked at several times here now already, that this is not the end of the story. The exile and the pain and the whatever is not the end. God has this a power to bring about something that is not in a particular moment, and he will fulfill his promises. All right. Thoughts about Ezekiel in general, this passage of scripture? I'd love to hear them. Chat some more. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.